October 1966. An American Gambit series reconnaissance satellite, passing over the smoke-hazed and desolate waters of the Caspian Sea, takes a series of photographs that will literally stun CIA analysts into a state of stupor. On the grainy black and white photos delivered from space, a giant object was clearly visible, defying all logic of the military science of that time. It was larger than any existing aircraft in the world, its length exceeded 90 meters, its wingspan seemed anomalously short, and on its hull, two large letters stood out clearly: KM. But the most terrifying thing lay elsewhere. Pentagon analysts calculated that this incredible behemoth, weighing 500 tons, was not merely gliding on the water, but flying over it at a speed exceeding 500 kilometers per hour, just a few meters above the surface. In Langley's secret reports, this unidentified object was immediately dubbed the Caspian Monster. Official Washington was convinced the Soviet Union had created an absolute weapon capable of stealthily approaching US carrier strike groups and destroying them in a matter of seconds. But why was the official Soviet press silent about this technical marvel? Why did the pages of Pravda and Izvestia write about the labor feats of combine operators and the overfulfillment of 5-year plans, while in conditions of the strictest secrecy on the Caspian, they tested an object half a century ahead of its time? And most importantly, comrades, why was the project, into which billions of rubles were pumped from the country's budget, the project capable of forever changing the balance of power in the Cold War, ultimately abruptly shut down, and the monster itself left to rot on the seafloor? Behind these questions lies not just a story of one engineering mistake or bureaucratic stupidity. Here, spy passions, behind-the-scenes games of the Kremlin nomenclatura, betrayal, fatal envy, and secrets sealed in archival folders stamped top secret are intertwined. If you thought you knew everything about Soviet military might, then this analysis will completely overturn your understanding of what the great Soviet machine was truly capable of and what ultimately destroyed it. To understand how this engineering madness was even born, we need to transport ourselves to the atmosphere of the 1960s. It was a time when red calico fluttered over the world. Ambitious Gosplan directives descended from above onto factories and research institutes, and the Kremlin thirsted to demonstrate to the capitalist West the unconditional superiority of Soviet science. Amid the whispers of communal kitchens, the people discussed space flights, but behind the closed doors of defense departments, a completely different work was boiling. The Soviet Union needed an asymmetrical response to the US naval dominance. American aircraft carriers controlled the world's oceans, and the Soviet economy could not quickly create a classic fleet of a similar scale. And here enters the stage the main genius of this project, Rostislav Alekseyev. A living legend, head of the Gorky Central Design Bureau for hydrofoil vessels. Alekseyev had already gifted the country the famous passenger rockets and meteors that glided along the Volga, but his ambitions went far beyond river arteries. He deciphered a physical phenomenon that aviators considered a dangerous enemy, the so-called ground effect or wing in ground (WIG) effect. When an aircraft's wing moves in close proximity to the surface of water or land, a dense air cushion forms beneath it. Air is literally compressed between the wing and the surface, sharply increasing lift and reducing drag. For ordinary pilots, this effect was a curse, leading to accidents during landing. But Alekseyev decided to force this natural force to work for him. Thus was born the concept of the Ekranoplan, a hybrid of a ship and an aircraft that did not fit into any of the existing classifications. The documentary record and preserved reports of the CPSU Central Committee unequivocally confirm. The Soviet leadership, headed by Nikita Khrushchev and later Leonid Brezhnev, was inspired by this idea. Secret decrees were signed, colossal funds were allocated, and the construction of a true behemoth began at the Krasnoye Sormovo plant in Gorky. Officially, this project was documented as the ship model, hence the mysterious letters KM on its hull that so alarmed American intelligence. The dimensions of this craft astonished even seasoned engineers: a length of 92 meters, a wingspan of 37 meters, and a takeoff mass reaching an incredible 540 tons. To lift this giant from the water and accelerate it to cruising speed, 10 VD7 turbojet engines were installed on it. In the summer of 1966, the KM, under conditions of total secrecy, at night, in parts, under covers, and escorted by state security officers, was transported along the Volga River to a secretly created testing base in Kaspisk, near Makhachkala. From the perspective of dry facts and the logic of Soviet military bureaucracy, the Caspian Monster possessed phenomenal, almost fantastical capabilities. It could fly at an altitude of 1 to 5 meters above the waves, remaining completely invisible to the air defense radars of the time, as its flight path was below the radar horizon. It was unreachable by naval mines and torpedoes, since it had virtually no contact with the water while moving. Meanwhile, its speed of over 500 kilometers per hour allowed it to cross the Caspian or Black Sea in a matter of minutes. The main military strategic purpose of the ekranoplans was to deliver lightning-fast missile strikes and deploy troops. Later, based on the KM design, the Project 903 missile Ekranoplan Loon was created, equipped with 6 supersonic Moskit cruise missiles. Such a ship aircraft could sneak up on an enemy aircraft carrier at an extremely low altitude, unleash a deadly salvo, and escape before the enemy's defense system could react. In parallel, the troop-carrying Ekranoplan or Lyonok was being developed, capable of transporting hundreds of armed soldiers with special equipment over vast distances in minimal time. It seemed that the Soviet defense system had acquired a weapon of victory. The gears of the great machine had worked perfectly, and Alekseyev was poised to become a national hero on the level of Korolev or Kurchatov. However, comrades, if everything was so perfect, why did this triumph of Soviet thought turn into one of the darkest and most hushed-up tragedies of the Soviet defense industry? Why did the official newspapers remain silent, and why was an impenetrable wall of secrecy and special services erected around Kaspisk? This is where we step beyond the threshold of the official facade and descend into the dark labyrinth of alternative versions, spy conjectures, and archival secrets which for a long time were only whispered about in the smoking rooms of closed R&D institutes. There exists a persistent and extremely intriguing hypothesis that the Ekranoplan project from the very beginning became an arena for a harsh, uncompromising confrontation between the KGB, the Ministry of Defense, and the Ministry of Shipbuilding Industry. A real war for budgets and influence unfolded in the nomenclatura corridors. Alekseyev's Ekranoplan did not fit into traditional frameworks. The USSR Air Force refused to accept it into its inventory, stating, "It's not an airplane, it can't fly high, let the sailors deal with it." The Navy, in turn, dug in its heels and retorted, "It's not a ship, it has wings and jet engines, give it to the pilots." Rostislav Alekseyev found himself caught between two fires. He did not have powerful nomenclatura cover in the Central Committee. He was not part of the party elite that fed from closed distribution centers and received nomenclatura rations. He was an obsessed designer, an artist of technology. According to one of the office legends circulating among engineers, a direct conspiracy was being prepared against Alekseyev. The leaders of traditional aviation design bureaus, such as Tupolev or Yakovlev, understood perfectly well. If ekranoplans were recognized as a priority, the billion-dollar allocations for developing new strategic bombers and transport aircraft would be cut and redirected to Gorky and Kaspisk. But this is only part of the shadow. The conspiratorial side of the Caspian Monster story is deeply intertwined with international espionage. Rumors say that in the late 60s, the CIA conducted a large-scale covert operation with a codename related to the Caspian Sea. The Americans were so frightened by the photos of the KM that they utilized all possible channels of agent intelligence. Foreign agents were infiltrated into Makhachkala and Kaspisk under the guise of tourists, diplomats, and scientific staff of the Hydrometeorological Service. Whispers in the Research Institute smoking rooms suggested that people with portable photographic equipment were repeatedly caught at the test base, and Caspian fishermen found strange containers with surveillance equipment in the remnants of fishing nets. Moreover, there is a hypothesis that it was American intelligence, through its agents of influence within the Soviet Ministry of Shipbuilding, that provoked constant inspections and sabotage of Alekseyev's work. The goal was simple: to hinder the project by any means necessary until the United States could create its own means to neutralize this threat. And what was happening at the top-secret base in Kaspisk? The atmosphere there resembled a genuine spy thriller. The facility was guarded by internal troops and special state security units. Local residents were strictly forbidden even to look in the direction of the sea during tests, and any attempts to approach the water area in private boats were suppressed by warning shots. But despite all precautions, you can't hide a prickly object in a sack. The wildest rumors crept through the whispers of communal kitchen conversations in Makhachkala. They said that they were testing not just a flying ship on the Caspian, but a secret tectonic or climatic weapon. According to another version, the Caspian Monster was created exclusively for transporting a special type of Soviet atomic bomb, capable of causing a giant tsunami off the coast of a potential adversary. There were even tales of underground and underwater bunkers dug into the coastal cliffs, where an entire squadron of such monsters was allegedly hidden, ready at the first order from the Kremlin to rush through the straits into the Mediterranean Sea. However, the main shadow plot of this story is connected to the fate of Rostislav Alekseyev himself, and the catastrophe that served as the pretext for the destruction of his program. In 1974, during tests of the Orionok assault Ekranoplan, an accident occurred. Due to metal fatigue and a defect in the hull, the tail section with the stabilizers broke off in the water. Alekseyev, showing fantastic courage and cool-headedness, while at the controls himself, managed to keep the machine afloat and, using the remaining engines, guide it to the shore, saving the crew and the secret technology. Any competent expert understood this was a triumph of the design's survivability. But officials from the Ministry of Shipbuilding Industry used this incident as the perfect pretext for a crackdown. Minister Ivan Nostikov, who had long held a personal grudge against the stubborn and independent designer, issued a humiliating order. Alekseyev was removed from his position as chief designer, stripped of leadership of the central design bureau he had created, demoted to head of an ordinary department, and effectively forbidden from managing tests at the range. Behind this decision, engineering circles saw a clear trace of sabotage. The designer was literally broken over a knee. His signature was removed from the blueprints, and the project began to be slowly and systematically strangled by bureaucratic red tape. Then, in 1980, a tragedy occurred that put a definitive end to the story of the Caspian Monster itself. During another test flight, conducted without Alekseyev's involvement, the pilot made an error. He raised the nose of the craft too steeply during takeoff. The KM lost speed, tipped onto its wing, struck the water, and sustained damage. But the most mysterious part happened next. The gigantic ship didn't sink immediately. It remained afloat for a full 10 days. The rescue services and the Navy had a sea of time to tow the unique craft back to base, haul it onto a slipway, and repair it. However, no one lifted a finger. The order to rescue the monster never came. High-ranking officials in Moscow simply watched as the unique machine, worth hundreds of millions of rubles, slowly took on water and sank to the bottom of the Caspian Sea. Was this just ordinary Soviet negligence? Or did someone in the highest echelons of power consciously order the secret object to be sunk, to finally bury Alekseyev's life's work and hide the traces of embezzled state funds. Just a few months after the demise of his greatest creation, in that same year of 1980, Rostislav Alekseyev himself passed away. He had broken himself physically and morally while rescuing another Ekranoplan model during tests, sustaining an injury, and then burning out from cancer in a matter of weeks. The great designer died, and his creation was left an orphan. But let's set aside the conspiratorial fog and try to conduct a stern, objective analysis. Where does the stylish spy myth end in this story, and where does the merciless truth of life begin? If you pit the supporters of the conspiracy theory against the proponents of dry historical facts, a far more complex and dramatic picture emerges. On one hand, the version that the Caspian Monster project and ekranoplans in general were destroyed solely by the stupidity of officials and the conspiracy of aircraft designers seems very convincing. The Soviet bureaucratic system truly possessed an astonishing ability to destroy the most advanced initiatives if they didn't fit into the standard templates of Gosplan. The inflexibility of interdepartmental interaction between the Navy and the Air Force created a legal and strategic vacuum. In the documents of the time, ekranoplans were referred to either as ships of an original design or as aircraft of airfield rebasing. There was no ready infrastructure for them, no simulators for pilot training, no specialized docks, no developed manuals for combat application. Alekseyev's main patron in the upper echelons of power was the USSR Minister of Defense Dmitry Ustinov. As long as Ustinov held unshakable authority and could push funding through by sheer force of will, the project moved forward. But as soon as Ustinov died in 1984, the protective dome over the Ekranoplans collapsed. The heirs of the Soviet military Olympus preferred to invest money in familiar submarine cruisers and classical aviation. However, on the other hand, if one looks at the harsh technical reality without romantic embellishment, ekranoplans had colossal, practically insurmountable design flaws, and here code logic shatters many conspiracy theories. Firstly, there was the problem of operation in an aggressive marine environment. Salt water entering the superheated turbojet engines at extremely low altitude caused instant corrosion and clogged the nozzles with salt deposits. The engines failed many times faster than on conventional aircraft. Secondly, there was the phenomenal vulnerability to stormy conditions. An ekranoplan could effectively glide over the surface only with a sea state of no more than 2 or 3 points. In a strong storm, the ground effect would disappear, and the impact of a 200-ton machine against an ocean wave at a speed of 500 km per hour would guaranteedly lead to the destruction of the hull and the instant death of the crew. Thirdly, maneuverability. At a speed of 500 km per hour and an altitude of 3 meters, making a sharp turn was practically impossible. The turning radius was measured in kilometers, and any sudden obstacle, be it a large tonnage tanker, a lone rock, or a flock of birds, turned into an inevitable catastrophe. Soviet military analysts, conducting impartial calculations, gradually came to a disappointing conclusion. The Ekranoplan is a highly specialized, incredibly expensive, and capricious weapon. Yes, the Lung-class missile Ekranoplan could quickly reach its attack position, but its combat radius was limited to inland seas, the Caspian, Black, and Baltic. In the open ocean, with its giant waves and unpredictable weather, the Caspian Sea monster turned into an easy target for US carrier-based aviation. American F-14 Tomcat fighters didn't even need to descend. They could shoot the unprotected from above Ekranoplan with long-range missiles from an altitude of 10,000 meters, remaining in absolute safety. The psychology of the Soviet power of that period was defined by two factors: a paranoid fear of falling behind the USA, and simultaneously a panic fear of taking responsibility for radically new, risky concepts. When Khrushchev became enamored with Alekseyev's idea, the system picked it up under hooray patriotic slogans. But when the time came to translate the few exotic prototypes into the category of serial weapons and spend tens of billions of rubles on creating entire squadrons and infrastructure, the Soviet machine creaked and went into reverse. The era of stagnation did not forgive audacity. It needed clear, time-tested metrics, the number of tanks manufactured, submarines laid down, and cast iron pigs produced. The brilliant, visionary genius Rostislav Alekseyev simply did not fit into this grey, grim line of functionaries. When in 1991 the great and mighty Soviet Union finally collapsed and the red flag was lowered over the Kremlin, the era of ekranoplans was definitively buried under the rubble of the empire. Funding ceased completely. The unique Lung-class missile Ekranoplan, the only completed representative of its class, was left to rot on the territory of a closed plant in Kaspisk. The Olyonok-class landing craft were decommissioned for scrap, and the Caspian Sea Monster itself, the pioneer of this unimaginable era, remained lying on the dark bottom of the Caspian Sea, a silent monument to an era of bold hopes and unfulfilled illusions. Just consider this tragic symbolism, comrades. A machine that was meant to terrify the Pentagon and demonstrate to the world the might of Soviet industry was abandoned and forgotten by its own country. Not long ago, the sole surviving Ekranoplan, the Lune, was towed across the sea and hauled onto a sandy shore near Derbent, where it was made the centerpiece of a future park area. And today, this rusting titan, towering over the Caspian surf, resembles a prehistoric leviathan cast ashore. It gazes with its boarded-up portholes and empty containers for cruise missiles into the endless sea expanse, as if asking us, what was it truly? Was the Caspian Monster a brilliant breakthrough, a revolution in military technology, which was incompetently missed, trampled, and drowned in a bureaucratic swamp by a blind party system? Or was it a grandiose, insanely expensive technological utopia, a beautiful phantom of the Cold War, doomed to perish from its very first day due to the laws of physics and harsh economic reality? Each of us must find the answer to this question ourselves. Vote in the comments, comrades. Whose side are you on in this historical debate? Do you consider Alekseyev's project a mischance for our country's absolute leadership, or an inevitable and logical mistake? Write your opinion, argue your point, let's have a real discussion. And of course, subscribe to the channel, like, and hit the bell so you don't miss new investigations and declassified materials from the most secret archives of a bygone era. Until we meet again on the pages of history.